Welcome to Spink Insider, the podcast where history is valued. Here today I have one of our special guests, Simon Narbeth. Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening. My name's Simon Narbeth, and I am a professional banknote dealer. And I'm very fortunate that my father was a leading light in the hobby.
Oh, he definitely was, Simon. And we'll talk about it, of course, today. It's one of the founders of International Banknote Society. He was the founder number one, the member number one.
He was the founder of the society,
right?
In 1961, and the first journal he produced for the society was on the 1st of July 1961, and he did found it.
Of course. We have.
And he generally promoted the collecting of paper money.
Do you know when he started collecting himself?
Well, I think he was buying all kinds of collectibles, even in the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Not just banknotes. It would have been
no, he had
interests
of all kinds of other things. But he was a keen collector of arrowheads and stuff like that off the seashore. But his banknote interests really would have been from the early 60s onwards.
Yeah, there is this thing with collectors in general. So we say collecting is in the blood.
Yeah, Dad is 100% born collector.
Right.
It was just who he was.
Oh, that's amazing. So the banknotes, of course, he is the founder of WWII, the member number one. And I thought maybe we could start talking about banknotes in general and what a banknote is. So I have a few ideas on that and what a banknote is. So banknote is a medium of exchange, of course, storehold of value. Yeah. Then it's unit of account because you can count it. The more interesting one I found, which was standard of deferred payment, and that's to do with time value of money, which means you can pay for the contracts in the future. So you account in a currency and you incorporate the interest rates. And the fifth side I thought of it, of course, from notophilic side. And I was thinking it's a piece of history. It's an encapsulated piece of history with the imprint of the time, of the things that were going on in the time, in the country perhaps, geopolitical landscape. So that's where notophily comes, people who collect banknotes.
Yes. I think it's worth mentioning that paper money, the early material, was usually produced in terms of duress.
Mm-hmm.
So, extraordinarily enough, Connecticut issued banknotes in 1690 before the Bank of England. But this was all down to scarcity of metal to make coins.
Of course. So under the times of duress, they would revert to paper.
And in most cases of the very early paper money you get, it's always down to a lack of metal to make coins.
Right.
So palm-struck notes, 1661, it was all about scarcity of metal to make coins. 1695, Thor Molan, an emergency issue of banknotes because the ships that were carrying his goods didn't come to shore in time, so he asked the King of Norway to issue these emergency banknotes in 1695.
Yes, well, these are fabulous notes, by the way.
Unfortunately, because the pirates raided the ships of his goods coming to shore, he went bankrupt.
Oh, really?
Which is why these notes of 1695 do actually survive.
Right. And when you look into earlier notes like Ming note as well, you see it has a depiction of coins, a sack of coins on the
That's right, the strings of coins.
That's
but
right.
The thing is, that they came up with a very novel idea. To save carting about strings of these coins, the idea was that you could do it in a piece of mulberry bark paper.
Yes, exactly.
Which is what the whole idea was.
Right. Well, I guess, do you think there's even earlier precedents of goldsmith receipts? I guess that's the very beginning of emergence of coins.
I think this is a very nebulous area because the Italians claim they have a form of paper that was used as an exchange. So you could either argue that is paper money or isn't it paper money?
Right.
I think the definition has to be, is it issued by the bank of the country?
I see.
That, I think, gives it more credence.
Legitimacy, yes.
So the palm struck note 1661 is the Bank of Sweden, which, it's the bank.
Of course.
So you have to look at it that way.
Yeah, so it's the issuing authority of the country.
Yes.
So going back to the beginning of banknotes, and it's a reoccurring theme that I heard. Soldiers coming back from World War II, some of them like Albert Pick, actually.
Yes.
He was a POW in US, I believe, for a year.
Right, yes.
And he came back and he studied philosophy and other things, and he started collecting banknotes. So the re-emerging theme is after the times of stress like war, Second World War, they would look for things to do that maybe just to find hobbies and other things. So that's where I see the biggest emergence of banknote collecting.
Absolutely. And Albert Pick was one of the key pioneers. Right. He did the first catalogue. But that's the gift he's given us.
Oh, it's a huge gift.
We're always ever going to use his numbers.
Yes.
But the thing I think is really wonderful was that Dad used to say when he first started dealing in 1970 was, if we had 5 of a rare note, it was a hoard because there are only 3 collectors. Now, that obviously excludes United States.
Right, we're talking about world banknotes.
A lot of people don't understand that the United States were 20, 30 years ahead
in collecting,
in collecting than many other countries. They had a very, very big advanced market.
And of course, they have very striking, iconic notes like the tribal chief or the bison note or the watermelon note that's sold for quite a bit of money.
Now, talking about the watermelon note, it was sold in 1944 for, I think, $1,475.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Going back to your dad's first beginnings of dealings in 1971, I saw the catalog he produced in 1971, and I have some notes. He had a Palestine 100 pounds, 1927, of course, in a very good condition, I must say, and it was listed for 500 pounds.
Oh, absolutely! This was the era. I mean, the thing, it was a lot of money. But what a banknote! Don't you wish you would have bought that in 1970?
Well, Palestine currency, Boreas, is one of the mostly collected areas, of course, under British administration. And I was looking into the history of that because we got a charity note found in a charity shop, luckily bought to us by a charity, people who were working at charity. And they went to their local dealer, and the local dealer said, "Oh, it's an interesting note. Maybe it's £1,000. Maybe you should contact Pink."
Mm-hmm.
So they came to us and we gave them a value, and they couldn't believe. So they said, "Well, we have to talk to our managers." We said, "It's okay." So we kept the note in our vaults for security and insurance purposes. And ultimately we sold it for £168,000. And the condition was it was a fine condition. The letter D was missing. The side was chopped. So when I look at your dad's note was in much superior condition.
Yes, but that was the early period of collecting, you see.
Absolutely. And then another thing I found out in 1975 was Qatar Dubai set full set. And just before the podcast, we were discussing that it says it was mounted in an album.
Yes.
And I just wonder what that is, because I know 2 sets that were mounted in an album, and they sell for 7 digits now, easily.
Yes.
I wonder if it was one of them, but even if it isn't, we could easily get 50,000.
Yes.
And maybe after this episode, once it's released, someone will call me and say, "Oh, if you have one, I'll buy it at 50,000.
Yes.
That would be quite interesting.
But, I do know that Dad did meet Pick a few times.
Right.
But Dad also did the first of his books on collecting paper money in 1968.
And that's the Beginner's Guide for Collecting Bank Money.
Yes.
That is amazing.
Yeah, that was 1968.
So that was even before Albert Pick published his catalog in 1974.
Yes.
So your dad was 6 years ahead of that.
He was writing a lot on lots of different other subjects. He did quite a few different beginners' guides.
Well, and Albert Pick, I have this saying that I think I believe on it. He actually dedicated so much of his life, because when I look at vintage catalog, I look at the modern catalog, but more than anything, special catalog. It has all these different issuing authorities. It really is like a lifetime of work to compile it.
You wonder how, without the use of modern technology, and you'd have to write letters round the world asking these banks what did they issue, when did they issue it, how you could have actually
gotten the information.
Got the information.
Oh, yes. Well, that's shocking to me.
And if you think about this, the first Krauss, 1974, how could he have compiled it?
A to Z. It's all the countries, all the issuing authorities. Obviously, he supplemented with time when the new information came. But it's one of those fundamental works that I say, if he would have dedicated his life to rockets, we would already be in Mars.
Yes.
That type of thing. It really requires so much work, I believe. And we're, of course, very grateful to him. And then, of course, he sold his collection was more than 180,000 banknotes. So he sold it to a bank in Germany.
That's right, the Hyperbank.
Hyperbank.
Yes. And I wonder whether that's available if they have an archive of it somewhere. I mean, it would be interesting to see.
I'm sure it's there. I haven't seen any of that on the market. So actually, interestingly enough, talking about Albert Pick, in this morning I spoke to Michel Musinski, whose father was Maurice Musinski. And I remember having lunch with him. And he recounted this most fabulous story to me. He said after World War II, his dad started collecting banknotes. He was a stamp collector in the 60s. He sold his stamp collection, started buying banknotes and exchanging them with Albert Pick. And the interesting thing that really captivated me, actually, they were sending big envelopes of banknotes that they were fond of to each other, knowing what each other collected and never exchanged any money for that. And I thought that was really the beginning of swapping banknotes.
Yes, I mean, that must have been amazing to see what was in those envelopes.
I do wonder sometimes what was there.
It's well worth mentioning as well. And I do get people ask me a lot, and they say, why didn't paper money collecting take off sooner? And I said, the answer is very simple, because back in 1964 or 65 or whatever, you might have earned £11 a week.
Right.
So how could you keep the new £10 note when it came out if your living wage was £11 a week?
Right.
And this is why when you looked at stamps, the sets always went up to £1 because people could afford to buy them.
That was much more affordable.
That's why one of the reasons paper money didn't take off.
Right. Well, now it's much easier, I guess, with £50 in England.
But that was one of the key reasons, which is why people didn't save. Okay, so in the early 70s, there were very few people who would subscribe to a new issue service from dealers if they could get them, which is why some of our African £5 wildebeest notes, for example, in mint condition, are one of the world's rarest notes in mint, because people didn't save them because there were so few collectors.
They were so expensive. Well, that makes perfect sense, of course. So how did you get yourself into banknote collecting?
I basically originally had more of an interest in stamps. And when Dad started to work on his own in late 1981, I basically joined him a couple of years later. And I must say, I was smitten with banknotes, and I tended to be one of these sort of people that would, I'm going to have to familiarise myself with this subject. So I used to lie there in bed and I used to read the catalogue cover to cover.
The standard
it was the only way I would, because if you start banknote collecting without seeing the books first, and you see the books, the three key Krauss catalogues, Pick catalogues, it's a bewildering amount of countries.
Of course.
And you have to familiarise yourself with basically what's in the books to a point.
Yes.
And the only way you can do it is to literally go cover to cover. And I did that.
Right. Well, that must have taken you quite a bit of time.
That led me to try and understand the familiarity. And what you find is that stamp territories are very, very rare in banknote territories.
Oh, in which sense?
So you get a stamp from the Leeward Islands, a whole mass of stamps.
Right, but very few banknotes.
Try finding a Leeward Islands banknote.
Incredibly difficult, yes.
Exactly.
Absolutely is.
So you have this is where there's an enormous crossover like that, where you have to familiarize yourself with that. But
even so, going back from standard catalog of world paper money, also Duggleby, or as we call it now,
yes. Well,
EPM.
I'm afraid to say, as I work in the subject, I have to have basically the half of the B numbers in my head.
Yes, which is phenomenal,
because it's the only way you can recognise it's no good trying to go through a collection and look up every note every 5 minutes. You know, really to go through it and know instantly if you've got one of the good prefixes, which I hope I could do.
Yes, well, I'm sure you do. I always try to consult you on those. Well, whenever I'm in your shop, it's very easy because you know all the reference numbers. Another thing which I found very interesting about your shop, and that was from talking to other dealers. And they would come and they would say, "Oh, I was at the Simon shop." And he said, "I wanted to buy much more from Simon, but Simon would just stop selling to me." And I said, "How come stop selling to you?"
You can't buy it all. We've got to let some other collectors.
Yeah, which I found amazing because it also shows the dedication that it's not just the business. It's the passion. It's for other people as well.
Oh, no. I mean, it would, if I'm honest with you, if I'd taken a lot of money one day, I would kind of clam up a bit. Yes. I mean, you no point.
Well, that's a good problem to have.
Some people treat dealing as if you're dealing in cabbages, but I have a genuine love and passion for it. And I do sometimes think of one of the two of the things I've sold, thinking I really am going to miss that one now.
Right. Well, it's always lovely to come to your shop and see all the banknotes, and this is the beauty of it, that you have all this variety of banknotes that I can just flick through and see myself. Now, I remember a story of you telling me about the White Bank of England £5, that someone couldn't sell them to the market because market was so thinly traded that maybe you could tell me the story.
Well, I know Dad told me a story when he was working for the people he was trading for, that he had such a large hoard of Marn £5 notes in mint.
Oh, wow.
That they were able to reduce the price from £8.50 to £7.
Right.
Because he had such a large hoard. And wouldn't we love to get our hands on those now?
Oh, absolutely. Man is one of the most interesting cashiers to me, actually.
Yes. But I mean, I can recall when we were in our first shop, me and Dad together, in the very early 80s, we had a guy come along and he said, "Do you like buying these white notes?" He goes. And I said, "Yeah, sure, mate, we'll buy these off you." And we bought a considerable number of Harvey 10s that were in decent condition. And we said to the guy, "Where did you get these from?" And he said, "Well, we run a series of safety deposit boxes." And he said, after so many years where the rent hasn't been paid on the box, we're allowed to open it.
Oh, I see.
And sell the contents of the box. And he said, and that's what we were doing.
Right.
And a lot of these guys made really good money because in these boxes, they were just swapping the old white fiver notes that were in other people's boxes for ordinary cash.
Oh, I see.
And this is a lot of English white notes came from these sources.
Really? And so where was the first shop?
It was down a place called the Archers by Embankment Tube Station. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it was dingy dark, but it was cheap. And the stuff that used to walk in there was out of this world sometimes.
Well, especially nowadays.
We had, I remember some chap turn up with, and these had come out of a bank in Iran. And there was like 240 colour trial notes of the world.
How many?
About 230, 240
of
colour
the world
notes of all banks around the world.
That is amazing.
And one of the sets, which was really lovely, was a Kuwait first series colour trial set.
Kuwait.
Yeah, that was nice. That was one that I remember well.
Yeah, well, that must have been very colourful and nice.
We got some interesting things down there.
That is amazing. And how was trading in the Arches? How was it?
Rough and ready. I mean, it was basically an old car showroom turned into a collector's centre with a lot of should we say, other dealers that may not have been 100%
right
to the wind, you know.
And that was the first shop of banknotes in London.
No,
dedicated just to banknotes.
Well, for us, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, and even now at your shop.
Oh, the current shop. Yes, I think we could say we're one of the only few dedicated
in London, dedicated just for that.
Yes.
I'm not aware of any other shop that's dedicated just for that.
Like everywhere else, you know. One thing that's worth mentioning is that what Dad did tell me was, in the very early years, a lot of coin dealers poo-pooed banknotes.
Right.
Because they didn't think there was anything in it. Okay.
So they didn't
Once
bother
they
to deal with
started
them.
to realise that there was actually money in paper money, a lot of coin dealers started to deal in banknotes.
Oh, I see. That's a nice transition. So going back to the Bank of England and Oman, there's a very interesting subject about the Bank of England black and white banknotes, and that's to start with Caterns and Pepiat, and of course that's the Operation Bernhard, under which they have made a film called The Counterfeiters.
Yes.
So maybe you could tell us more about the Operation Bernhard.
Well, one of the strange things, without going into too much technical detail on these, is there seems to be an anomaly in the watermark. On the second end of England, on the notes,
yes,
there's a watermark line that goes into the middle of the toe of that N on the fakes, but it's on the left-hand side.
On the real one.
On the real ones. And it seems to be such a very strange error to have made.
Yes.
And there's no evidence from any of the people who helped make them to why this was done. No one seems to have any idea. It would logically appear to me to be that they themselves could tell at a glance if it was a bad one.
Right. Though I wonder, maybe the war effort was there, maybe they didn't have time, maybe there wasn't supervision. Of course, we're speculating heavily, though the story that is known amongst collectors is that inmates who were producing it deliberately tried to sabotage the operation. Of course, we don't know. I don't know personally.
Well, yeah. I mean,
consistent.
Okay, so if something like that had have happened, the thing is that even if they had succeeded in doing that, because we know there are errors on these notes, I've had them myself, where the signature is in the wrong, the date is wrong for the signature.
I see.
So you get glaringly bad errors like that. But my thought of that is that it is actually their waste.
Oh, I see. Like
the
errors they have made
their
themselves.
Printers' waste, and they basically dumped this waste into one or two of the various lakes.
Yeah, so most of these were recovered from the lakes and piles.
Well, 1959, it was Lake Toplitsy in Austria, and that's where they retrieved an awful lot of notes. But the suggestion's been made that that lake has many times been visited.
Oh, I have no doubt about
so that's
that.
Where,
Scuba divers must enjoy the dives.
Also, it's worth mentioning that as the war progressed, an awful lot of these notes were in Italy, which is where the great majority of them tend to come from.
Oh, I see, from Italy.
And after the war, they were being sold as souvenirs.
Right.
Okay. So there was a supply already.
Right. Well, and also an interesting factor that, so Nazis, of course, tried to inflate English economy with their currency. That seems to be one of the reasons they did it, to destabilize the trade and perhaps even erode the trust in the currency.
The original plan of the Operation Bernhard, was they really thought they would drop these by plane over England.
Okay.
They tried in 1940 to produce examples to do this with, but they couldn't get it right because this operation was called Operation Andreas. There's two forms to this forgery. They produced marvellous quality lithographically printed banknotes.
Okay.
But they were no good. They weren't like the originals.
Right.
The paper was marvellous, like the paper they use on the Bernhard notes.
It just was LIFO
but
instead
the
of
LIFO printing just didn't do the job.
Right.
By the time they'd got round to printing them right, or good enough for what they needed to do, they realised, hang about, it's far better for us to use these on the black markets of Europe and pay all our spies in our fakes.
Oh, so maybe even the spies didn't know these were fakes?
Oh, absolutely. And Cicero, the most famous spy of all, tried to sue the German government after the war, saying, you diddle me by paying me in Bernhard notes.
Oh, wow, how interesting that is. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That is phenomenal. And have you seen any LIFO printed ones?
No, I don't think anybody has ever seen one. I'm told that there's a fragment of one of these notes in existence, but I've not seen it. It's the same you hear about people saying there's meant to be Bernhard £100 notes.
Right.
I've never ever seen one.
Yes, well, some sources say that they have prefixes recorded, but they do make a disclaimer they haven't actually seen one.
I think that's rather important.
Of course it is.
But no, as a forgery, they were brilliantly good.
Absolutely. Well, it's very difficult to know even now. We have to stop and pay attention to find the differences because they're so well made and the watermark is there.
If you tried to buy one of these early it's always worth mentioning, the early notes have got 5 digits on.
Okay.
So if you have a Bank of England note that's got a 6 digits, it's always a note with a metal thread, so it can only be real.
Right.
Unless someone's tried to dupe you with a photocopy.
Right.
These, on the other hand, it's down to the fact that you have to be able to look at them to see if it's a real one or not.
Yeah, you have to know where to look at, of course.
Yes.
Brilliant. Simon, would you like to show me the difference on the genuine and the fake Bank of England note?
With Bernhard notes, there are many different ways of telling, but one of the most secure ways is the Britannia vignette. At 5 o'clock, there is a scroll in the design round here, which creates a perfect curve. On the real notes, the design, it indents into the design and comes out again.
Right.
And that is 100% foolproof.
Yes, well, that's one of the indicators I use myself.
What I tend to do is say to people, that's one of the key ways of telling. The simple visual way is the watermark. If it's in the middle, 98 times out of 100, it's going to be bad.
That's right. Well, on the letter N, exactly.
Yeah. Very, very rarely do you come across a genuine note with the watermark in the middle of the triangle.
Right. And even the boldness of the Britannia's design is a little bit different, though if you haven't seen an original one, it's very difficult to compare.
Yes, but I can say that we once had a London IBNS chapter meeting.
Yes.
And at this meeting, someone produced a £10 Catton note. And half the supposed experts in the room could not decide whether this was a real note or a Bernhard. And I can say that it's sometimes on the £10 Catton's notes, they can be really good. The quality
really,
is excellent.
Even the indenture?
Well, that from my own memory, I really can't remember that now.
Right.
But one of the other things about the Bernhards is because they were not printed in pairs, they were printed in sheets.
Okay.
The watermark paper used on the original notes has 3 deckled edges on 1 straight edge. And when you hold this up to the light on the real note, you get a thinning round the edge of the 3 deckled edge.
How interesting.
The Bernhard notes don't have it. Can't have it because they're cut. Now, what the inmates did, they realised they had to duplicate the effect of the edge.
Mm-hmm.
So they made sure the paper was damp.
Yes.
And they practiced with rulers to tear the paper to duplicate that edge.
Oh, I see. Right. And hence not a straight cut.
So they've got one straight edge here, which is what you'd get on the normal note, the real note. But the fakes, they had to very carefully make sure they did as best they could the decal edge.
Yes.
And there must have been a lot of wastage.
Well,
but so basically, visualize that the notes were printed like that.
Inverted pairs.
The real notes were printed like that, which is why you have. If you imagine this is the genuine note as well, that's a Bernhard, but you get a décollage. That's how you got to view it.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating.
And also, the other thing people don't often realise is that the corners are missing on every other note.
I see.
That's how the Bank of England paper makers could tell at a glance it was watermark paper for a £5 note, which is why they did the notches on the other values.
Right. Well, also an interesting thing with Bernhards that I really find is they're quite affordable.
Absolutely. The reason they're affordable is that they produce something in the region of 11 million.
Right. Well, I'm sure not all of them survived.
Someone will probably correct me on the exact number, but the fact is there's an awful lot more of them than...
Right. Well, but when you think of them, they were in lake, first of all. I'm sure not all of them were recovered. Some of them successfully spent and perhaps taken by the Bank of England, destroyed, of course.
Yes.
So I'm sure not all of the 11 million have survived.
But, the strange thing is, this paper is really tough. And in water, if you can imagine all being sandwiched together, in water, in a fairly airtight container, they could survive.
But were they in airtight containers? I thought they were recovered from a wooden boxes.
Well,
that's what the photos display.
They look like ammunition case boxes.
Yes, that's exactly how they look.
Yeah, but if they're compressed like that, really tightly compressed,
I see.
It would allow them to have...
the inside notes would be tightly compressed, exactly,
which would help them survive.
Yeah.
So even if the case leaked, it would still,
not be impermeable.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, that's fascinating. Well, but one thing which I think about it is, well, you can own a piece of history. That is tangible piece of history. It's quite recent history too, but if you think about it, it's about 80 years old plus.
Yes, but it's one of the best kept secrets of World War II.
Right. Well, at the time, of course, later it came out.
Can you imagine if news had got out that this was, they were doing these?
Well, that would have been disastrous. But I'm sure Bank of England would have employed quite a few people to spot the differences. Yes, but hence later they enhanced their security features as well.
Yes, absolutely, which is why 6-digit notes have threads.
Threads, absolutely.
Yes.
Interesting. Well, another thing which was very interesting to me, in 1819, of course, counterfeiting banknotes was capital punishment. And there was this note made, or at least it was a kind of advertising note. It's called anti-hang note, as collectors call it.
Yes, this is the Crookshank note.
Right.
And basically, it was very unfair that a poor girl would be hanged for being in possession of a forged note when she couldn't even read. I mean, she wouldn't have known. And they used to send them in to buy goods with forged notes.
That's right. It said those who produced or carried the note or facilitated.
Right. So the idea, people were getting this was seen to be a bit rough. So what they did was they raised a petition to change the sentencing. And Crookshank designed this fabulous anti-hanging note, which has got on it a picture of Britannia eating the children.
Right, yes.
In the background of Britannia, you can see the transportation ships sending people to Australia.
That was one of the punishments. You will be shipped to Australia.
So it did change things. They are very nice things, the Crookshank note.
Collectors really like them. We had quite a few in auction, and they do very well, actually.
But you have to be very careful because there is a much not so well produced example which was done in a book in 1878.
I think it was done in something along the lines of a banker's magazine, perhaps.
Yeah, it was the story of
Crookshank.
It was a story of Crookshank,
right?
Basically,
and it still has value, actually.
Yes, but not as anything like as good as the thing.
Of course. But, well, that's interesting. So, in general, when we look at banknote collecting, how do people collect? There's so many ways to collect about.
Well, as like with stamps, you can collect thematically with banknotes. I've come across collectors in the past that collected scientists. I've had people collect insects.
Right.
You could do that with banknotes.
Of course. Well, the beauty of banknotes in general, I feel, it reflects the best history of the country.
Absolutely.
So in Israel, we have Einstein. In other countries, we have significant people like in England, we have Churchill on the £5 and we have Alan Turing on a 50.
Yes. I think it's one thing worth mentioning is, although not now in more modern times, but in the 20s, 30s and so on, the key part of a banknote was the portrait, and the engravers that did the portraits were the best they could get.
Yes.
And it was always considered to be the most unforgeable part of the banknote.
Or the portraits, because of the intricate details?
Absolutely. And that was one of the key reasons they put portraits on banknotes.
Right, as a security feature type
as
of
it was
thing.
A key security feature.
Right. Well, we had some families from engravers that would come to us and talk to us. So I had the pleasure of talking to a few of them. And I said, well, how would you actually engrave the plate? So, of course, the expertise and quality and refinement of your hand movement has to be very specific. And I say, well, what do you do if you do a mistake? And they said, well, we just don't do mistakes.
That's right.
Because then you have to start over.
Absolutely. And it was a painstakingly thing to do.
Yes, and it's greatly beautiful. They would chisel it out in a
which is why I don't think that you can get someone to try and create a modern forgery.
Right, yes,
because I just don't
that.
think they could use, even with the current modern plate-making technology they've got, to actually do it just that bit right. I can't see how they could do it.
Well, we've seen contemporary forgeries of things, and there's always signs.
Yes.
All the time there are signs. So in terms of collecting, what I like about that is people can collect by countries, by denominations, by signatures. They collect flora, fauna, important people they like. But one of the things I thought maybe we could talk about the early notes in general. And Tibet is one of the interesting areas.
Yes.
So we have first series of Tibet on our table.
Yes.
And I thought this is phenomenal, Tibet. Of course, your father has published the book on Tibet.
Yes, we haven't really mentioned that. His favourite country and subject was actually Tibet and China.
And China.
But he wrote quite a few catalogues on Tibetan banknotes with friends of his. Because in all fact, that to be fair to Pick and Krauss, that they couldn't cover it. It was too in depth of a subject. So him and his friends got together and did a couple of catalogues on Tibet in great detail.
Yes, which I had pleasure of reading.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to actually understand the differences.
And there is one odd thing about Tibetan banknotes is that they didn't have the ability to use numbering systems like we did. So obviously, for example, say you've got a Bank of England haste note, you'll find that after a certain period, the haste notes become numbered instead of hand numbered.
Mm-hmm.
And Tibet, they didn't have the ability to do the numbering, so they made sure all the notes were hand numbered.
Hand numbered, absolutely.
And they had the monks religiously trained to sit there and put the numbers on.
Yes. Well, and also an interesting thing, so they have two seals. They have the red seal, which symbolizes Dalai Lama's authority, which they couldn't put on a banknote if Dalai Lama wasn't there. So that's an interesting factor. But also the black seals are so minutely different that actually on my book, I had to spend quite a bit of time annotating all the differences. And if you would see my book, The Page of the Seals, I actually have highlighted with pen around where are the differences because they're so difficult to distinguish. And once you leave the book, you come back, you have to start again. So I actually annotated my book and perhaps we'll put it...
it used to drive me mad because I could say to Dad, I said, what seal's that? He said, 1A.
He would know it by heart.
He'd just take one look at it and say 1A, 1B, just like that. And I said, I can't see the difference. And he'd say, look, it's da, da, da. So yeah,
absolutely. And when you think about it, it's a note from 1913. Well, these notes are right for 100 plus years, and they're still in incredible condition. Some of them.
Those particular ones are lovely ones, and they are astonishingly rare notes.
Oh, they are, absolutely.
So they really are. I mean, from what I understand, if you exclude the 5 tam, there's less than 100 of any of the other denominations.
Right.
In his book, he recorded far less of some of them than the other.
Right. And even if you look at varieties, 5 tam has 2 varieties, the green and the bluer one.
Yes, but there's blue. You get a blue, greeny, yellowy one. There's even a yellow one. You have to be very careful because the 5/10 notes have got a triangular design in the top corner.
Okay.
Which only occurs on the 5/10, and you occasionally see people selling the 5/10 as the other denominations because they think it's a different colour.
Oh, I see.
So you can get the 5/10 in a very odd colour, off-colour.
Right, because they were handmade from the natural inks, hence the discoloration, I guess. Yes. Well, another thing which was very interesting to me, the British Guiana notes. We have one on a table, hundreds, $100, and I just thought, it does resemble the Bank of England notes so much to me. The design is, even the watermark pattern, if you would look at it, it's so similar to Bank of England.
Yes.
And these are the most phenomenal notes. If you think England and British Guiana, they're quite far apart. Nonetheless, they would produce very similar banknotes.
I find it very strange that they this British Guiana note, they've actually almost mimicked a Bank of England tablet for the denomination. I mean, it's really almost copying it.
Yeah, exactly. Which is so interesting to me too. So I hope collectors will appreciate which.
But the Bank of England were pretty clever, even in the early years. They did make sure that if you made paper, you were not allowed to make paper with a squirrely line going round the edge.
Why would that be?
And if you look at all early Bank of England notes, they have a little curled line that goes all the way around the edge.
Right.
And that was prohibited for anyone else to make.
Oh, I see. So it was their trademark type of production.
It was the idea was for banknote security, you could not make paper with that.
Right.
In the watermark.
Even I'll grab those. Interestingly, the Mongolia notes. So it's one of the ways people collect. If you look, first of all, they're incredibly colorful. They look like Persian carpets to me. But an interesting fact to me, and I would love to look into it even further. They're Mongolia notes denominated in dollars.
I must say I've never understood that myself, and I've seen these. If I'm honest with you, I've seen these many times.
Yeah, well, they're very popular series, incredibly popular. Actually,
I know they are now, but I can tell you from my past experience, they were always considered to be very colourful, very interesting. But that's it,
right?
That they're essentially unissued banknotes.
Well, I guess. Now, at least the market has recognized that.
The ones I regret not ever buying was the large notes that came before those.
Really? Oh, you had an opportunity to do that?
Oh, yes, and I should have bought one.
Right. That would have been fun to put it in auction.
They really are rare.
Yes. Well, another thing which was kind of a subject of banknote collecting, and it's kind of a subject I'm fascinated by, and that's hyperinflation in general. And the thing with hyperinflation, of course, many times it's to either sponsor the war, they would release government bonds or war bonds, and the country would go into inflation, then hyperinflation. People would lose trust, try to get rid of the currency to go into more stable currency or commodities like gold. So one of the recent cases that happened, of course, we're all aware of that, which is Zimbabwe in 2008. And they went from $1 to $100 trillion. Yeah. And people would tell me, they said, I think they had a high $500, and I believe it was red. Some of them said, well, we called it Ferrari note, and we didn't really realize why the government issued 500. That was such a high denomination. And just very quickly after that, which is, of course, a shame for the society because of the government's instability, and it prohibits the trade and even purchasing of the most simple things like burger. There is this article in a newspaper where someone's carrying blocks of cash to buy just one burger. And these things get repriced every day, every second day, every hour later on. They call it menu pricing, I believe, where you go to a restaurant, you order something, by the time you have to pay, the price has changed, which is quite complicated for restaurants. So yes, the $1 to 100 trillion.
Oh, we could tell you a marvelous story, which you actually sold them. And we were contacted by a barber in Zimbabwe. And this guy said, look, I run a barbershop in Zimbabwe. And he said, just for a joke, we kept in the corner of the room on a shelf, high up, a brick of 1,000 Zimbabwe 100 trillion notes for a laugh.
Okay.
Once obviously the inflation had stopped and they'd started to use other forms of money. Because in truth, the fact was, while this was all going on, you had euros, dollars, South African rand being used. And he said, we kept this in the corner of the hairdressers as a joke, these $1,000 trillion notes. And he contacted me and I said, are you pulling my leg? I said, come on, you're pulling my leg. No, seriously, we've got them. And I got them shipped. We got them arranged to ship to you. And I think you got him 36,000 for them.
Was that from you?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. But it was a laugh.
Similar amount of money, yes.
Yeah, it was a laugh because the guy was a barber in Zimbabwe that had them as a joke.
Oh, that's so interesting. So I know when they came out, they were gifted as souvenirs and gifts amongst collectors for fun.
I've almost sold out of them.
Yes, well, that's hence I came to your shop yesterday and I asked some to put an auction in. They said I don't have any.
Yeah, we can't get them. It's
right. So someone called me too, and they said I was a banker. And my friend was in distress, and he gave me a brick of 100 trillion, which is 1,000 notes, and I gave him $80, and I thought it's a rip-off. In any case, I kept it, and he said, how much could we get? And we got slightly more than what you just mentioned from a previous one, yeah. But he was very happy for the $80 investment, of course.
It's remarkable.
Oh, absolutely is. It's interesting how it went from $0.50. Now they trade at what, $1.50 roughly?
Well, we were selling them at £5 each, 3 for £12 when we had them. You know, I could pick up a phone and get from my mate, can I send me another 600? And I was at a show and I thought, do I want to buy 1,000 in one brick like that, you know? And I really kicked myself for not doing that.
Right. Well, we would have not known.
But hindsight's a wonderful thing.
They're very popular, of course, and everyone likes it because it's such a high denomination. Everyone's a trillionaire. It captures
the imagination of people, the word trillion. I think it really does.
Oh, and 100 of those.
And also, there's one thing about it that is quite unique. It's the only banknote with so many noughts on. There's no other banknote.
Yes, in terms of zeros
there's no other banknote that shows as many noughts.
Right, but it's not the highest denomination.
No. Well,
they had the Hungarian bipengo.
That's right.
And I did the calculations this morning, and that was 10 to the power of 20. And that's 100 million trillion. It's kind of difficult to wrap the head around. So what does that actually mean in terms of life? So if you would count each second in life to 100 million trillion, that would take 3.17 trillion years, which is 230 times more than the universe.
Yes.
Quite a bit. Quite a bit. Well, of course, these were never issued, but these are very popular too.
Yes.
Though they don't have zeros on the back because they didn't have space.
It's unfortunate because when you actually see a picture of one of these notes, you would actually not recognize what it was.
Yes.
It's all in text, and it just says 1 milliard bipengo. It just would not.
But the zeros.
You just wouldn't recognize that this is what it is. But they did issue 100 million bipengo, which is actually the highest note ever issued in circulation.
Oh, that's the one that was issued for circulation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the purple one was never issued after that.
The green one was never issued, but the blue one before, which was in the same set, was issued, and that's the highest note ever issued. But it's nothing to look at. You would not recognize it if you weren't a collector.
No, of course. And it's not a very
cheerful
note.
You look at the Zimbabwe one immediately, and it's...
it's 100 trillion.
100 trillion.
Well, another interesting thing that illustrates the change of the market, we had the Zanzibar set, of course, 1 to 500. And I know that it was offered in late 90s for below $10,000. So when we had a chance to sell it, it was from the same vendor, at least from the same family. So he got $852,000 for the set. The total realized price of it was $852,000. And I thought that's a huge change in the market.
Yeah, I can remember that set being offered originally in another auction house, and it failed to selling for $6,000.
Right, and that was in the 90s, yeah.
Yes, because that dad did the describing for them at that point. Yes, quite an astonishing
increase, isn't it, if you think about it?
Yes. Well, there's also a lovely story about David Keeble, who was one of the key English banknote dealers. He was one of the key early English banknote dealers. And when he used to get short of a few quid, he'd go to the Bank of England and pay in a few white fiver branch notes. Because they had so many of them in stock. He could afford to get rid of some of the lower grade ones if he needed a few quid.
That is marvelous. Well, we probably could sell those
now in any
case.
Yeah.
Well, another thing I was thinking of, how do people collect in general? And there's this emergence of trophy hunters.
Yeah.
So we had this commercial Bank of India in New York that sold for significant amounts of money. And once we get something extraordinary that's never seen before, well, perhaps like this British Guiana note of 100, or seen very rarely, you have this emergence of people who just say, oh, well, actually, I have to own that. So there's recognition in the market that the rarities should go to people who really want them.
Yeah. It's quite extraordinary how this can happen. I mean, I myself, rightly or wrongly, had a passion to buy low-numbered English notes.
Right, of course you do. Of course,
I owned the lowest number Turin £50 note, number 5.
Number 5.
Well, that's my own personal one.
Right. Well, that's
which
a lovely
I paid
note.
13,000 for.
But that's QE2.
Yeah, that's the Turin AA01.
And that is amazing. Number 5.
That was the chief cashier, the governor of the Bank of England.
Of course.
And I'm so grateful for them for doing the charity auctions.
Yes,
because it gives collectors an opportunity to get these things.
Well, but when I think about Bank of England, and thanks really them for the initiative in early 2000s, they realized that they could do charity auctions. So they started doing charity auctions with us. And now instead of the banknotes going into circulation, they would go to collectors who would pay the premium, and they would actually raise money for the charities, which was a fabulous idea.
Absolutely marvellous idea.
I think,
it's a great idea.
Because collectors will still look for them.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that other banks followed suit later?
Yes, very much. So Bank of Scotland did that, Clydesdale Bank, Royal Bank of Scotland. There was, of course, Pudsey issue, which was phenomenal success. It's a fantastic note if you think about it.
Yes.
So for Bank of England, I thought I'll have a look at how much the banknotes brought in value. So the last auction we had, which was 5, 10, 20, and 50, King Charles III with Sarah John's signature, in total they realized for the charities more than £914,000. Which is remarkable. Because if you would think otherwise, some of these would go into circulation. Collectors would still want to buy them. So maybe they would go through currency exchanges, try to buy them. Of course, the condition would be much different than uncirculated notes, but they would still look for these ways. So it just facilitates, and the charities get the money. So they raised money for the 10 charities, and it was phenomenal success. So I'm glad they really did that. Well, if we think about it, Simon, when people start collecting, because also your dad was publisher of the book of the Beginner's Guide of Banknote Collecting, what do you think is advice in general to collectors, to young collectors, or perhaps even senior ones?
I'm going to be controversial here because I remember meeting when I was much younger, I met a few older collectors who I actually didn't know who the names of them were. And I remember meeting one guy, and he bought some of his collection in to show Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all about the fact of, oh, yes, well, you've got that one and I've got this one and all this. But the key thing was condition was never a point.
For the rare notes?
They never worried about the condition.
Right.
It was all important about having one, but they weren't, too worried about the condition, which is now swung the other way, where it's absolute paramount.
Right. Well, it is to some extent, but I know people who, when they start collecting, they want to get a collection. Once they have the collection, they want to upgrade. And it's an interesting way, because if you have a duplicate, you keep a higher grade, you let go of the lower grade, it goes back to the market, there's a collector base.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a nice way if you think you share with the collecting community.
Thing is that when you go back to the early pioneers,
yes,
what they were seeing, they wouldn't have known at the time. That was it.
Yes, yeah.
Now, I remember him telling me that he had a group of fantastic German 50-mark notes of 1872, which are as rare as hen's teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that he bought all 6, and that at the time, he did not know that they were the 6. I might be corrected in saying that, but that is what he told me.
Right.
That at the time, he said, when we were there in the early years of trading for this other company, things were coming in. They didn't know what there was, how many there were. It was just completely unknown. And in fact, people find this very hard to understand, that there was once upon a time the large Montevideo banknotes of Uruguay, the large 50 and 100s, were once very, very rare.
Right.
And he had the guys from the government in his office once selling him the unissued books.
Oh, wow.
So he this is all before it had turned up.
Right. Well, you never know really what will turn up. But the German notes, have you ever seen any others after?
No, I'd love to see that. Absolutely.
Here we go. So that was
wonder banknote.
the only thing.
Wonder banknote.
Yes, that would be.
But I mean, if I'm honest, I kick myself for selling something we bought in 1985, because at the time we were trading, and we had Iraq 1931 1 dinar number 1, and it wasn't a cancelled specimen, it was the actual issued note.
Oh, that is wonderful.
And then we had the next note of the next King Ghazi number 1.
Number 1. Oh,
because it started at 900,000 on 1.
Right.
And at the time we thought, we get 1,250 quid for this pair.
That is nice.
We were very fortunate because this guy that used to be the archivist of the Chartered Bank in Bishopsgate, he was very friendly towards us. And he said, he'd say to me, he said, Colin, I really don't care what you give me for these because I know you're going to find them a good home.
All right. Oh, that's nice. Very nice.
And we bought amazing stuff from this man. But that was a long, long time ago. And that's one thing I recall that I now wish we'd kept.
Yes. Well, one of the things, Iraqis really love their kings.
Yeah.
Iraqi has boomed exponentially, actually. And especially King Faisal first.
But I mean, I have to tell you that at the time of that war and the aftermath, we were being offered so many Iraq notes of all different eras, we really didn't know what to believe.
Right.
And I mean, you're familiar with the 1958 set with the cog?
Yes, of course.
We were being offered those in about £15-20 a set.
Really?
Mint. And we were running out of money to buy them.
Right.
That's how many were coming out. And I remembered seeing that as a 1 dinar note in good condition being offered for $180 before all the troubles. Right. And then they were coming out. So you didn't know what to believe what was coming out.
Well, there was no way of knowing, of course. In retrospect, everything's easier to think through.
Retrospect, it is, yes.
Should we talk about anything else? Well, Tibet, I mean, it's so complicated to talk about these things because these are very niche subjects.
They're very obscure little areas.
Very expensive, though.
I've got to be honest with you.
Well, that's the beauty of the banknote collecting.
There is, there's one person we haven't mentioned, actually, who was one of the most lovely human beings you could ever wish to have met, was Nicholas Rhodes.
Right.
Who was, how can I put it to you? Dad was very good on Tibet, but Nicholas Rhodes was the genius. He was the great man on Tibet.
Well,
like Wolfgang Bursch.
Wolfgang, yes.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things when I came to you to talk about Tibet, and that must have been 2 years ago, you said, these 3 people, they really knew their Tibet notes, and the history is kind of fading. I'm happy they captured it in books, because then we can refer to that. But imagine if that history would have not been put in the books. That would be so difficult. So the history could be lost. And of course, that's one way of owning the history of those things.
But I mean, from what I'm told, that once upon a time in the early 60s and 70s, you could go out to Nepal and Tibet and there was stuff everywhere. It was just how it was.
The wonderful days of 60s and 70s. Well, no one knew it will take off in such a manner, but these notes now, especially in this grade, this is substantial amounts of money, actually.
Yes. There is one thing about paper money, which is the way to look at this, is they're miniature pieces of art that have their own individual serial number, which makes them a very, very secure thing for you to record and know it's yours.
Yes. Well, and also now I must mention, we have third-party certification too, which I know there's some people like it, some people like to touch the notes. But for me, as a younger collector, I really like graded notes. I know you cannot touch them, you cannot, but then they're immune from environment and you can put them in your drawers and organize, and it's saving space as well.
Well,
and they guarantee the grade and condition.
The modern hobby, but everything is different. I mean, if you think once upon a time, there would have been a very small market around the world. I mean, you would have. It was not global. Today, it's global.
Very global.
That's where things are so different.
Well, and people come from all around the world to the auctions in general and the shows.
We're finding it very hard to get good foreign banknotes because there's a good market for foreign banknotes everywhere.
Right.
That's basically what we're seeing.
Yes. Well, I'm sure the time will come and it will be good days in 2030s.
Yep.
Simon, so if people wanted to find your shop, how could they do that?
Basically, very simple. Walk down Cecil Court, round the corner from Leicester Square Tube Station, 20 Cecil Court, London, WC2N4HE. But just remember that the key banknote days are Wednesday, Thursday and Saturday, because that's when I'm there.
Brilliant. Well, I hope the next time you open the door, there will be a queue outside.
That's very nice of you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed watching the episode. Please like and subscribe, and we're looking forward to seeing you tuned into the next episodes.